Welcome back to the garage. I know it's been a long time since I've made a video, so I thought I would do a garage update, a channel update, to let you know what the status of all the vehicles in my lineup are and what is in store for the future. So, to get started, let's talk about the Toyota Tacoma. I left here, it was getting sent off to a body shop to see what the damage estimates would be. Unfortunately, insurance did end up totaling the truck out because estimates were in the range of $15,000, which greatly exceeded what the truck was worth in the eyes of insurance. So I had to battle with insurance for a while to get a proper valuation for it, but ultimately we were able to agree on a price. And they totaled it out. I got a check for the truck, but I ended up buying it back from insurance for $2,000. I had it for about 48 hours, looked over the truck, and I was like, gosh, this is just more work than I really can take on. It required frame pulling and lots of body work that I'm not able to do in my own garage. And once you start getting third parties involved, a project can just take a really long time. So I decided to just cut my losses. I just couldn't bring that truck back around myself. So I ended up putting it up for sale and sold it and made a little bit more money on it by just selling it outright to an individual. So it's in good hands. Someone else is going to use the engine and transmission in it, and I think it's going to a good home. So the Tacoma is gone, but with that, it kind of put a lot of balls in motion, if you will, because that was my daily driver. I needed to find a new vehicle to use as the car I relied on. And what was my backup? Well, the F10 5 Series. I made a couple videos on this car and then you heard nothing more about it, and that's because I was like, oh crap, I have to get this car ready to go so I can trust it for a long time to come. I need to be able to start it up and drive wherever. I just didn't have time to capture all of the maintenance and repairs that I did on the car before I actually needed to start using it. So I just went ahead and went through it, did a lot of repairs and fluid changes and all that. Nothing too complex, but stuff you gotta do if you're gonna trust a car. And that's why I didn't end up recording any of that project. I did take a lot of pictures, so I may do a kind of a recap video on kind of what all I did. But basically, the car is good to go. It was relatively new as far as cars that I own go, so there wasn't anything that extreme that needed to be done. It wasn't really worthy of an entire project series. So basically, the F10 is complete and running great, and I'm using it daily. Another car that has left the stable is the 300ZX Twin Turbo. I'd owned that car for 6 years. I did everything to it that I could possibly imagine. It was a perfectly reliable and awesome vehicle that I've enjoyed and been able to do track days in, take it to car shows, including Radwood 2 in California, and I just felt like I did everything I could do with the car. Unfortunately, I don't have enough space to store everything, or else I'd have probably 10 cars in here and 10 motorcycles. I just don't have the space for that. So unfortunately, I did have to put it up for sale, and it found a new home and a enthusiastic buyer who actually has his own YouTube channel, which I'll link into here so you can see any future work that happens on that car. It was a little bit bittersweet seeing that car move on to its new home, but I know it's in good hands now. You'll notice that a motorcycle is missing from the lineup here, and that is right. The 2010 Ducati Multistrada has moved on to a new home as well. I decided that it was kind of the middle child of the two bikes I do have, this B&W R1200 RT, which is good for sport touring and long distance travel, and a pure super bike, the Ducati 1198S. Kind of fit in between the two, and I just didn't see myself actually using it. I either want a bike that I can take to the track, which is the 1198's purpose, or a bike that I can do some trips on, which is the R1200's purpose. I didn't really need a mix of the two. So I ended up putting it up for sale, and it has since come up for sale a couple more times. So I don't know what's going on there, but I know that the bike was really in great shape, and whoever buys it next is going to have an awesome machine for a long time to come. So one of the other balls that was put into motion after the Tacoma was wrecked was that my wife was wanting a new car. It just kind of inspired her to say, you know what, I'd like to get a replacement car too. She saw me driving around in the B&W F10, and who can fault, you know, after seeing that car, hey, I want to upgrade as well. She'd been driving a 2010 Mazda 3 for quite some time. She bought it new, and she was just ready for something different, something a little nicer, I guess. So we ended up picking up an Audi S3, a 2016, and it had some upgrade parts on it, but it was incredibly good condition. It's not here in the garage right now. My wife's out at work at the moment, but I have taken lots of pictures of all of the things I've done to that car. Of course, you can't leave something alone if it comes into this garage. I go through all the maintenance, and I did a couple of upgrades to it, so it's quite the little screamer, in fact. It does have the DSG transmission, so it's a fast shifting automatic, and I kind of like it, honestly. I never thought I'd be a fan of automatic transmissions, but after driving that car around, it's quite fun. It's been tuned up to stage 2. It's got a larger intercooler on it, bigger intake, downpipe, and all of that kind of stuff you get into if you start working on those Volkswagen-based 4 cylinders. So like I said, it's pretty fast, very peppy, and a fun car to drive while also getting low 30 miles per gallon on the highway. It's basically as economical as her Mazda 3 was. And it has all-wheel drive, so it'll be feasible to use in the winter when we see snow. Her Mazda 3 wasn't really ever featured on the channel just because it always worked well. It was just basic maintenance to keep it going. But I have since sold that car as well. I do still have the BMW E39, but I have put it up for sale kind of half-heartedly because I love the car so much. I did have to get a storage unit just to keep it in, to keep it out of the elements, because again, I just have a 2-car garage, and I wanted to keep the F10 inside the garage, and of course my wife's S3 is going to be in the garage as well. So I've had to cough up the money to rent a storage unit for the time being. So if you're interested in the E39, shoot me a message. Maybe we can work something out. And finally, I do have a new project on the horizon. I just picked it up yesterday, and it is a real practical enthusiast style project. It is not a newer car that just needs basic maintenance. It is a car with real problems, and it is real interesting. So stay tuned for that very soon. I think you guys are gonna like it. And before I sign off here, I wanna show you something I did to the F10 that I'm very proud of. So it's no secret anymore that the N55 series of engines, the inline 6 turbocharged engines that they put in the 535i's and various other BMWs, tend to have connecting rod bearing issues, and it really comes down to oil pressure loss. And instead of going into this car and just preventatively replacing engine main bearings and addressing the symptom of a particular issue, I decided to put in an oil pressure gauge. So the car doesn't come standard with an oil pressure gauge. It just tells you whether or not the oil pressure is below a certain threshold, and a light pops up on the dashboard. Not exactly a good thing, because by the time that light pops up, it's already too late, more than likely. So what I've done is installed this cool oil pressure gauge that goes right there into the HVAC vent, and it looks and blends with the rest of the interior really well. And it's given me visibility on how this oil pump in this N55 engine actually operates. It's a variable oil pump that operates very strangely when you think of just a standard oil pump that is always providing a linear amount of oil pressure based on RPM. This one, if it's down at idle after the engine's warmed up, it actually drops down to 20 PSI or so, which seems extremely low, but BMW calibrated it that way to reduce fuel consumption and pumping losses at idle. You can see on a cold start, it actually sits almost at 100 PSI until you kind of rev it up and warm up the engine a little bit, and then it'll drop back down. So this oil pressure gauge is giving me great insight into the health of the engine and gives me a forewarning before anything starts to go wrong. So I think this is a much more reasonable approach than simply just replacing the main bearings and hoping that you're good to go. You see, after it starts to warm up, the oil pressure starts to dip a bit. So again, once it's warmed up, it's about 20 PSI. And on the highway, you can see about mid 40s. Again, that's just the nature of a variable oil pump like that. If you're used to a linear oil pump, a standard kind of dummy oil pump, those numbers could certainly scare you a little bit. So again, that's just a quick recap on the status of the channel. Again, apologies, no videos have been out in the past few months. It's just been kind of hectic around here, and I haven't been able to find the time to actually make videos. So hopefully that's going to change here in the soon with the advent of this new project, which will show up very soon. So stay tuned. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all again next time.